The ridge had not seen a stranger in years. Wind moved through the tall grass the same way it always had, slow, careful, unbothered. The lone rancher believed his past was just as still, buried, finished. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost lost to the night. "Do you remember me?" The words struck harder than any storm. His hands froze, his breath caught. Because some voices never fade, and some ghosts don't come to haunt. They come to be remembered.
Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. If you believe in second chances, quiet strength, and love tested by time, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Rescued by the Ridge and stay with us until the end. Some stories deserve patience. The man on the ridge rose before the sun each morning, not because he had to, because sleep brought memories he no longer welcomed. His cabin sat high above the valley, weathered wood, a single chimney, built by his own hands, plank by plank. From the porch, he could see miles of land stretching quiet and empty. That was how he liked it. No voices, no expectations, just wind, sky, and work that asked nothing more than effort. He moved through his chores with practiced ease, water drawn, tools checked, fences walked slow and steady. His body remembered the rhythm even when his heart tried not to remember anything at all. People in town used to ask why he never came down anymore, why he never brought a woman to the spring dances, why the ranch stayed so quiet. He stopped answering long ago. Silence was easier than explaining a loss no one else could see. Once he had believed life would be shared. Once he had stood beside a woman and promised a future. That future never came. Years had passed since then, enough years that his face had hardened, enough that hope felt like a young man's mistake. He told himself he was finished waiting, finished looking down the trail, finished believing the past could return. The ridge taught him how to survive alone, how to listen to storms, how to read the sky, how to endure without asking for mercy. What it never taught him was how to forget. That morning felt no different. The air was crisp, the horizon pale with coming light. He stepped onto the porch, cup in hand, ready to begin another quiet day. That was when he saw movement along the lower trail. A figure, slow, uncertain, human. He narrowed his eyes, heart tightening despite himself. No one traveled that path anymore, not unless they were lost or searching. The figure stopped, just at the edge of the ridge, and for reasons he could not explain, the man did not turn away. He stood there, watching, as the past, long buried, began to walk toward him.
The man stayed where he was, one hand resting on the porch rail. The figure below did not move at first, as if waiting to be seen. The light crept higher, pulling shape from shadow. A woman stood on the trail. Her dress was plain, travel-worn. Dust clung to the hem. She carried a small bundle close to her chest, like it held more than belongings, like it held purpose. She looked up at the cabin, not with fear, with recognition. That unsettled him. Strangers usually waved or called out. She did neither. She simply stood there, steady despite the climb, despite the thin air. The ridge tested people, it always had. Those who did not belong rarely made it this far. He took a step forward, boots creaking against old wood. The sound seemed to break whatever silence held her still. She lifted her hand, slow and careful, not in greeting, more like permission. "You're far from town," he called down. His voice carried rough edges from disuse. "Trail doesn't lead much farther." "I know." Her voice reached him clear as the morning, calm, worn, familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. He told himself it was nothing. The mind played tricks when a man lived alone too long. She started up the last stretch of path, each step measured, thoughtful. When she reached the gate, she stopped again, waiting. He opened it for her. The hinge groaned. Everything on the ridge groaned eventually. "You look tired," he said. Not unkind, just honest. She nodded. "I am." "Looking for work?" "No." "Lost?" She hesitated, just a breath. "Not anymore." That answer settled heavy between them. Up close, he could see the lines time had drawn on her face. Not harsh, just earned. Her eyes held the look of someone who had seen long roads and learned when not to speak. "If you're headed elsewhere, there's water and a place to rest, for a while." She studied him then, the slope of his shoulders, the set of his jaw, the life written into his hands. That would be kind, just for the night. He nodded and turned toward the cabin. She followed without question, as if she already knew the way. Inside, the space was simple. One table, 2 chairs, a quiet that pressed close. He poured water. She drank slowly, as though each swallow mattered. Their eyes met across the table. Something old stirred, something he had sworn was gone. And as the day wore on, he began to feel it, the sense that this woman had not found his ridge by chance.
The quiet inside the cabin grew heavier as the hours passed. Not empty, waiting. The woman sat with her hands folded around the cup. She did not rush her words. She did not fill the silence the way strangers often did. That alone set her apart. Silence did not make her uneasy. It seemed to belong to her. He noticed small things, the way she looked toward the window when the wind shifted, how she paused before speaking, as if weighing the cost of each sentence, how her gaze lingered on objects in the room, not with curiosity, but memory. He told himself it meant nothing. He set a simple meal between them, nothing fancy, enough to carry a body through the night. She thanked him with a nod and ate slowly, respectfully, like someone who understood scarcity. "You've been on the road long?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Then, after a moment, "Longer than I planned." He accepted that answer. He had learned not to pry. The ridge had taught him that everyone arrived carrying something they were not ready to name. As dusk settled, the fire gave the room a soft glow. Shadows moved along the walls. The cabin felt smaller then, closer. She set her cup down and drew a steady breath. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "how a life might have gone if one moment had turned differently?" His pulse slowed, then quickened. The weight in his chest returned, heavier now. He searched her features again, the curve of her mouth, the familiar sadness in her eyes. Recognition hovered just out of reach. She leaned forward slightly, not enough to crowd him, just enough to be heard. "Do you remember me?" she whispered. The room seemed to still. He did not answer at first. His hands tightened on the table, his breath caught somewhere between memory and denial. He shook his head once, slow and firm. "I think you're mistaken," he said. The words sounded practiced, like something he had said before. "I would remember." Her face did not fall. She had expected that. "Would you?" she asked gently. "After all this time?" He stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. The movement broke whatever spell had settled over him. He turned away, staring at the fire, as if it might give him certainty. "You should rest," he said. "It's been a long day." She rose as well. "Yes," she agreed, "it has." She moved toward the small room at the back of the cabin. At the doorway, she paused. "You won't ask again. Not tonight." He did not turn to face her, but as her steps faded, the truth pressed in from every direction. Some voices never leave a man, no matter how far he climbs to escape them.
Sleep did not come easily to the man on the ridge. It never did. But that night it stayed far beyond reach. He lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move around the cabin. Each sound carried weight. Each creak felt like memory stepping closer. He had buried the past carefully, year by year, thought by thought. He told himself it was settled, that what was lost could not return. Yet her voice would not loosen its hold. "Do you remember me?" He closed his eyes and images rose unbidden. A younger man, less worn. A woman standing beside him beneath a wide sky. Her hands warm in his. A promise spoken with certainty, not fear. He had been married once. Briefly. Happily, he had thought. They built plans the way young people did back then, with faith, with urgency, with the belief that love alone could carry them through anything the frontier placed in their way. They spoke of land, seasons, children yet to come. He remembered laughter, quiet evenings, the sense of belonging he had never known before her. Then she was gone. No farewell, no explanation he could understand. Only a message passed through others, words softened by distance and time, words that left him standing alone on the ridge, wondering what mistake he had made without ever knowing what it was. For years he told himself she chose another life, that the land had been too hard, that he had not been enough. Those thoughts were easier than hope, easier than waiting. He rose before dawn, restless, and stepped outside. The sky was just beginning to pale. The ridge felt unchanged, solid, reliable, unlike memory. When he returned inside, he found her already awake. She stood by the window, wrapped in a shawl, watching the morning light touch the hills. "You don't sleep much," she said, quietly. "Neither do you," he replied. They shared a silence filled with all the years between them. He studied her openly now, the way time had shaped her, the strength beneath her stillness. "You left," he said at last. Not accusation, fact. She turned to face him. Her eyes held no defense, only truth waiting to be spoken. "Yes," she said, "I did." "Why?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the familiar lines around her eyes, close enough that the distance he had built felt fragile. "Because sometimes," she said softly, "love makes people afraid of the wrong things." The words unsettled him more than any denial could have. He realized then that the story he had lived with all these years might not be complete, and that the woman standing before him was not a ghost. She was unfinished truth, asking to be heard.
The words she left hanging did not fade with the morning light. They settled, heavy and patient. He poured coffee in silence. The familiar motion steadied his hands, though his thoughts moved elsewhere. She sat at the table again, the same place as the night before, as if time had folded in on itself. "Afraid of what?" he asked, without turning. She held the cup with both hands, letting the warmth rise. "Of staying," she said, "and of leaving." He faced her then. The honesty in her voice left no room for argument, only listening.
The day passed slowly. Neither suggested she leave, neither invited her to stay longer than the night promised. The ridge watched as it always had, indifferent to the quiet struggle unfolding beneath its sky. They worked side by side, in small ways, a repair here, a chore there, no grand effort, just motion shared. Each task carried the weight of unspoken questions, each pause stretched longer than it needed to. He noticed how capable she was, how she did not ask for help but accepted it when offered, how her movements showed someone shaped by hardship, not broken by it. There were moments when he caught her watching him, not with longing, with recognition. As evening returned, the cabin felt closer than before. Shadows grew tall along the walls, the fire crackled low. She stood near the doorway, shawl drawn tight. "I won't stay longer than tonight," she said. He nodded. "I didn't expect you to." That was not the truth, but it was easier. Later, as the wind picked up, she sat by the fire, staring into the glow. "I never stopped thinking of this place, of you." He leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You made a life without it." "Yes," she replied, "but not the one I wanted." The admission lingered between them. Neither reached for it. When night settled fully, he showed her the small room again, the same one, the same distance. She paused at the door, fingers resting on the frame. "There are things you don't know, things I should have said long ago." He met her gaze, steady but uncertain. "And there are things I told myself so I could survive." She nodded once. "Survival can cost more than we expect." She stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. He remained in the main room long after the fire burned low. The ridge was silent, but his thoughts were not. For the first time in years, he understood something clearly. The hardest truths were not the ones spoken too late. They were the ones waiting just beyond the door.
Morning came gently, as if the ridge itself knew to tread lightly. The man was already awake, sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cooling cup. The door to the back room remained closed. He did not rush it. Some moments asked to be met, not forced. When she emerged, her face was calm, though her eyes carried the weight of a decision made long before sunrise. "We should talk," she said. He nodded. Yes. They stepped outside. The air was cool, clean. The valley below lay quiet, untouched by whatever truths were about to surface. They sat on the edge of the porch, close enough to share warmth, far enough to keep distance. She took a breath. "When I left," she began, "it wasn't because I stopped loving you." His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. "I was told things about the land, about the risks, about what staying would cost you. I believed I was holding you back, that loving me meant choosing a harder life than you deserved." He looked at her then, truly looked. "You decided that for me," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, "and that was my mistake." She spoke of pressure from others, of voices that planted fear where trust should have lived, of how young she had been, how unprepared for the weight of shared survival. The ridge demanded strength. She had not known her own yet. "I thought leaving would free you, that you would move on, that my absence would hurt less than my staying." "It didn't," he said, not harsh, just true. She nodded, eyes lowering. "I know that now." The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with understanding finally taking shape. "I waited," he said after a moment, "longer than I should have. Then I told myself you were gone by choice. It was easier than wondering if I had failed you." She turned to him. "You didn't fail me." He let that settle. Years of guilt did not dissolve in a single sentence, but the weight shifted.
I didn't come back to ask for anything. I came because I couldn't carry the truth alone anymore." The ridge seemed to listen. The wind moved softly through the grass, steady and patient. He realized then that the past he had lived with was only part of the story, and that survival, while necessary, had cost him more than solitude. As she stood and prepared to gather her things, he understood something else. Knowing the truth did not end the pain, but it gave him a choice he had never been offered before.
She moved quietly inside the cabin, gathering her small bundle. Each sound felt deliberate, final. He remained on the porch, watching the valley, though his thoughts stayed fixed on the door behind him. For years, his life had followed a simple pattern: work, rest, repeat. The ridge asked little more. It gave him shelter, purpose, a way to endure without risking disappointment. Letting her go once had nearly broken him. Letting her go again felt different. He was no longer young, no longer ruled by fear alone. She stepped back onto the porch, bundle in hand. "I'll be on the trail before noon," she said. "The weather looks fair." He nodded, though the words pressed against his chest. "It does." She waited, not for permission, for something unspoken. "You've survived well here," she said. "You always were strong." He exhaled slowly. "Strong enough to hide." She studied him, surprised by the honesty. "Survival asks that sometimes." "Yes," he said, "but it doesn't have to be all a man chooses." She shifted her weight, uncertain now. "I didn't come to change your life." "I know," he replied. "That's what makes this harder." He looked at the cabin, the fence, the land that had held him steady through years of silence. He thought of how safe it had felt to believe his story was finished, how lonely that safety had become. "You don't owe me anything," she said, gently. "Not then, not now." "That may be true," he answered, "but I owe myself something." Her eyes lifted to his. Hope did not rush in. It waited, cautious and respectful. "I spent years believing love was something that happened once, something you either held on to or lost forever." "And now?" she asked. "Now I see it's a choice," he said, "one that can be made again or not." She drew a breath, steadying herself. "I won't stay if it costs you peace." He stepped closer, close enough that the distance between them felt intentional, not forced. Peace built on avoidance isn't peace, it's just quiet. The ridge stretched behind them, vast, patient. It had watched him retreat from life long enough. He did not reach for her, not yet. "Stay," he said, not a command, an invitation. "Not forever, just long enough to see what truth asks of us." She searched his face, the man he had been, the man he was becoming. Then she set her bundle down, and in that simple act, the future shifted its weight. The bundle rested at her feet, untouched. The ridge did not change, but something within him had. They did not speak much after that. Words were no longer urgent. Action carried more meaning now. He showed her where supplies were kept, how the land moved with the seasons. She listened, not as a guest, but as someone relearning a place she once called home. The weather shifted by afternoon. Clouds gathered low, thick with promise of rain. The ridge had a way of testing decisions made too quickly. "We should secure the fence line," he said. "Storms push hard up here." She nodded and followed without question. They walked the boundary together, steady and unhurried, no rush, no strain. When the wind picked up, she held her ground. When the path narrowed, he offered his hand. She took it without hesitation, not clinging, trusting. At one point, the trail grew slick beneath their boots. He slowed his pace. "Careful here." "I know," she replied.
I remember. That single sentence carried more than instruction. It carried history, shared experience. The ridge recognized those who learned its language. They worked until the clouds passed, leaving the land quiet and damp. No damage done, no loss, just effort rewarded by restraint. Back at the cabin, they dried their hands and sat near the fire. He watched her warm herself, noticing how she no longer stood apart. The distance between them had softened, not erased, earned. "You didn't try to protect me," she said after a while. He looked up. "You don't need it." She smiled faintly. "That's new." "No," he corrected. "It's just something I didn't understand before." Redemption did not arrive with grand gestures. It arrived with patience, with the choice to stand beside someone rather than in front of them. As night settled, the ridge felt different, not smaller, more alive. She met his gaze across the room. "I don't know where this leads." "Neither do I," he said, "but I know where I've been." That was enough for now. Outside, the wind moved on. The storm passed without leaving its mark. And for the first time in years, the man did not feel like he was merely surviving. He felt like he was learning how to remain. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the cabin. The night had settled into a calm that felt earned. Outside, the ridge rested beneath a sky scattered with quiet stars. He sat across from her, hands folded, gaze steady but unguarded. For a long while neither spoke. There was no pressure to fill the space. Some silences invited truth rather than hiding it. "I used to think strength meant holding everything in," he said at last. His voice was even, but the words carried weight. "I thought if I didn't speak of what I felt, it couldn't be taken from me." She listened without interruption. "When you left," he continued, "I told myself it was easier not to ask why, easier than admitting I was afraid of the answer, afraid it would confirm my worst doubts." Her eyes softened. "And what were those?" "That I wasn't enough," he said simply. "That loving me meant choosing hardship. That you'd seen something in me I refused to see." She took a slow breath. "I was afraid too," she said. "Afraid I'd fail you. Afraid the land would demand more of me than I could give." He nodded. "We let fear speak for us." "Yes," she agreed, "and fear is loud." He leaned forward slightly. "I should have fought for the truth. Instead, I settled for survival." The admission lingered, honest and unadorned. No blame, no defense. "I never stopped caring," she said quietly, "but I didn't know how to return without reopening wounds." "I would have endured that," he replied, "if I'd known." She met his gaze then, steady and searching. "Would you endure it now?" He did not answer right away. Instead, he stood and stepped closer. Not to claim, to offer. "I can't promise ease or certainty, only that I won't hide again, that I'll choose honesty, even when it's hard." Her eyes glistened, though she did not look away. "That's all I ever wanted." He held out his hand, open, waiting. She placed hers in his, warm, real, a touch shaped by time rather than illusion. Outside, the ridge remained vast and unchanged, but inside the cabin, something long silent found its voice. Not in grand declarations, but in truth finally spoken.
Morning returned to the ridge without ceremony. The light rose as it always had, steady and patient. But the man noticed something new in it, a warmth that had been missing, or perhaps one he had forgotten how to see. They stood together on the porch, watching the valley wake, No plans spoken, no promises rushed. The future no longer felt like something to fear or outrun. It felt like something to step into, side by side. She moved through the cabin as if she belonged there again, not as a memory, not as a visitor, as someone who understood the quiet language of the place. He watched her set things in order, not because she had to, but because shared life leaves its mark in small ways. Later, they walked the ridge together, no destination, just the land beneath their feet and the understanding between them. The years they had lost did not vanish, they remained, woven into who they were now, but they no longer stood between them. "I don't expect the past to disappear," she said as they paused at the overlook. "Neither do I," he replied. "It brought us here." She smiled at that, a smile shaped by endurance rather than youth. What they were building was not the dream they once imagined. It was something quieter, stronger, a life chosen with open eyes, a partnership shaped by respect, not fear. That evening they shared a meal as the sun dipped low. The cabin felt fuller, warmer, not because of noise, but because of presence. For the first time in years, the man realized something simple and profound. He was no longer alone. Family, he understood now, was not defined by how a story began. It was defined by who stayed, by who returned, by who chose to remain when leaving would have been easier. As the stars appeared above the ridge, he reached for her hand. She squeezed it gently. No whispers were needed this time. The past had been remembered, the truth had been spoken, and a life once thought lost had finally been reclaimed.
Thank you for spending this time with us on Rescued by the Ridge. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Subscribe to the channel for more Old West tales of love, survival, and redemption. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did this story mean to you? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to explore our playlist for more stories like this. Until next time, may your path be steady and your heart at peace.